Hi everyone, I'm Jack from Raconteur, and I hope that you're doing well. I hope you're having a great week. I'd like to discuss At Night All Blood is Black by David Diop, which is a fascinating book. It's a fairly recent novel, and despite its short length, it is a really interesting book to read and to reread. It's a book that I am convinced rewards rereading because of how the narrative progresses. We're in the mind and memories of a young man from Senegal. Often the I apologize for all mispronounced names throughout this video. And we're in his consciousness and we're cutting deeper and deeper and deeper as the narrative progresses. We're spiraling through his mind. What life is like there, fighting for the French army during World War I in the trenches. The violence, the physical and emotional toll it has, seeing his close friend from Senegal who he grew up with die violently. And then the level of violence that Alpha is going to resort to find vengeance for his fallen friend in these nighttime raids against the German army, like all on his own. And as that occurs, we have the assurances of our narrator about his memories, about what's his experiences. But as we spiral deeper and deeper, we start to question some of these ideas. He remembers things in different ways. He remembers and amplifies his memory and adds to it. And it starts to cause the reader to want to shift our perception and to go back and rethink how he was presenting his life and his memories from the beginning. So it's a book that rewards that rereading. But throughout it, we're assured that he knows what he's doing. And we get this God's truth refrain, like the chorus from a Greek tragedy. I know, I understand, I shouldn't have done it. I, Alpha Nadia, son of the old man, I understand I shouldn't have. God's truth, now I know. My thoughts belong to me alone. I can think what I want, but I won't tell. The ones I might have told my secret thoughts to, my brothers in arms who will be left so disfigured, maimed, eviscerated, that God will be ashamed to see them show up in paradise, and the devil will be happy to welcome them to hell, will never know who I really am. The survivors won't know a thing, my old father won't know, and my mother, if she is still of this world, will never find out. God's truth, that paragraph ends, God's truth, the family honor will be spared, the honor of appearances. I know, I understand, I shouldn't have. In the world before, I wouldn't have dared. And so he keeps assuring us of God's truth, and we begin to see that he truly does inhabit both a physical hell that surrounds him in war and also a sort of mental hell that he's experiencing. And it really is a book that is horrifying to read. He goes on and he gets into this idea of, I had been inhuman by obeying duty's voice, but I was now free to listen no longer, to no longer obey the voices that command us not to be human when we must. And one of the true horrors of the book is this sense of we are seeing the unraveling of his humanity, and there's this self-awareness to it, but he's convincing himself and trying to convince, as he tries to convince himself, he's also to a certain extent trying to convince his audience, the reader, that what he's doing is the only course he has. And we're sort of on his side. He's drawing us in. And as we see him unraveling, we're seeing how inhumane everything around him is. Later on, he says, when I leave the belly of the earth, I am inhuman by choice. I become a little inhuman, not because the captain commanded me to, but because I have thought it and willed it. When I leap shrieking from the earth's womb, I do not intend to kill multiple enemies from the other side, but to kill just one in my own way, calmly, deliberately, slowly. And he's trying to seduce the readers into this version of his memories, that adage of we're all the hero of our own story. Alpha is firmly convinced of that, and we start to question that as the book progresses, and it does reach a very heartbreaking conclusion as his sort of humanity is unraveling around him. But we do have these moments in Senegal that feel like beautiful interludes, idyllic moments, like this moment in Eden right before the fall, right before the war starts and just everything becomes this hell on earth. Fari Thiam had taken me by the hand, looked me in the eyes, and then discreetly farther down. Then Fari had separated herself from the circle of friends we were with, and a little after she left, I said goodbye to everyone else, and I followed Fari at a distance as she headed toward the river. In Gandiol, people don't like to walk at night near the shores of the river because of the goddess, Mem Kumbabang. Fari Thiam and I didn't see anyone, thanks to this fear of the river goddess. Fari and I were too eager to make love to be afraid. God's truth, Fari didn't look back a single time. She was headed toward a little forest of ebony trees not far from the river below. She disappeared into it, and I followed her. And so we have those moments, but even those can be called into question by the end. And so the book, despite being this horrifying experience, despite being, in the vein of modernism, where we're cutting deeper and deeper into the consciousness of a person, also feels like a puzzle at moments. We're constantly guessing around what is really happening. What is Alpha really doing? And it's a book that rewards that close, attentive reading, and which is good because it's short, so a reader can do that. But it is a very, very violent book. It's a very graphic book. So if that's not something you're in the mood for, please don't read it. The single hand up here is kind of a clue about some of the violence that occurs throughout the book. But I really found myself in its thrall. The way that there was the God's truth refrain over and over is haunting and seductive, but it draws us in closer and closer to our narrator until we realize just who we've been spending time with as we read the book. In terms of some other books I was reminded of, the way that David Diop takes beliefs from Senegal and puts them into his characters. There are other characters who question whether Alpha is like the embodiment of a deum, a sort of spirit that's wrecking violence. The way that the river goddess is mentioned, that reminded me a little bit of how Peter Shelley Clark was taking those beliefs and fusing them into a really interesting narrative and book in The Black God's Drums, one of my favorite books from this year. The way that there's the violence in our narrator, and we're drawn closer and closer to a truly horrifying narrative, reminded me of The Kingdom of This World by Alejo Carpentier, which is a fantastic book. One of those books I consider to be a perfect novel. I was reminded of Blood Meridian by Cormac McCarthy. I was also reminded of The Land at the End of the World by António Lobo Antunes, who's a Portuguese writer. And he's writing from the Portuguese side of the war in Angola, when Portugal was trying to kind of retain its empire there over Angola. And our narrator in this book, it reminded me to a certain degree of some of what Alpha was sharing with us. Another great writer who writes from Senegal, Diop was born in Paris but was raised in Senegal. Another great writer would be Ousmane Sembène, and God's Bits of Woods is one that I'm looking forward to reading in 2022. Then there's the great film. Ousmane Sembène didn't just write books, he was also a film director, and directed one of the earliest films to be performed in an African language, and that would be Mandabi, or The Money Order. Great movie. The way that the book is shifting, the way that the violence and the rationales for violence, the irrational rationales for violence that exist, reminded me of David Peace's writing, and specifically 1977. And there's a way in which that refrain occurs in both Land at the End of the World, and then this time around with my reading of At Night All Blood is Black, I was reminded of The Rime of the Ancient Mariner by Samuel Taylor Coleridge, where we have a speaker who has to tell us the story, who has to share it with us. And as that's going on, we start to realize just what this person's existence has been like, and causes us again to go back to the beginning and reread it with this new eye, this new perspective. So I really was fascinated by the book. I'll probably reread it again in 2022. And it's one that I would encourage anybody who feels willing to engage with a book that it is, again, very graphic, very violent, to explore. So I had heard about it from Brian at Bookish, and he definitely, this was a good recommendation. I'll link his video about the same book in the description box below. But let me know if you've read this, and let me know if there are other books by African writers that you think are fascinating. And I'm looking forward to hearing from you. Thanks.